What's the funniest joke you've recently heard?
Okay, I apologize in advance. This is very dumb, but...
Good.
This tweet in the wake of the tariff announcement and the subsequent tanking of the economy was, well, I guess DEI stood for Da Economy is Good.
But Ted, can you do any better than that? I can't imagine it possible, but would you like to try?
The ones that I can think of are either not appropriate for family radio or take too long to tell.
This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we can't stop thinking about. I'm Molly Roberts, a columnist at The Post.
And I'm Drew Goins, author of the Today's Opinions newsletter. This week, we're talking about the role of comedy in our culture and in our politics.
Back in the years after the 2016 election, you could turn on the TV after dinner and find multiple left-leaning late-night hosts, mostly guys, dunking on Donald Trump during a single time slot. Or you could go on TikTok and scroll and encounter back-to-back-to-back videos of female comedians snarking about everything from abortion access to Melania's Christmas decorations. It seemed like, with the second Trump presidency, we were gearing up for a repeat of just that.
But by now, it's become clear that the flood of news coming from this Trump administration is even heavier, even direr than the last time. So do we need a laugh more than ever? Or are we in a political moment too serious to joke about? Is Trump 2.0 feast or famine for comedy? Today we have our colleague Theodore, Ted Johnson, here to get into all of this and more. Hey Ted, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
Let's start with one comedian in particular. Late-night host Bill Maher is usually one of Trump's stauncher critics, but he recently made headlines when he agreed to meet with the president at the White House. After the meeting, it was over dinner, he went on his show, and fans who were eager for a takedown were treated instead to a rave review. The comedian called Trump, of all things, engaged and likable. What did you guys make of this meeting? Are you convinced Trump is a chill dude now?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I was reading about this, and the thing that made me laugh most of all was learning that this meeting apparently was coordinated by their, quote, mutual friend, Kid Rock. So I am sold on this meeting just for the fact that we got to hear that little tidbit.
I would like Kid Rock to set up my social calendar.
There was a good column that we ran recently by Leon Krause, which I'm sure we'll link in the show notes and encourage everybody to read. And he's saying that Bill Maher totally got played. There is not an authoritarian in history who is not charming behind closed doors. And Trump knew exactly what he was doing. Bill Maher should have known better. But what really interests me here is beyond that motivation, what is the point of Bill Maher doing this, right? It feels to me like comedy has become so bifurcated as a form. Bill Maher's fans are never going to be anything other than mad that he has, one, met with Donald Trump in the first place, let alone said that the guy is gracious, measured, exhibits a good humor. All of these, like
good humor.
Yeah, exactly. Coming from a comedian, too.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think, Ted? What did it say that Bill Maher took the dinner in the first place? And how does his reaction affect his audience, affect the place of political comedy in America right now?
Look, when the president invites you to dinner and you're a comedian, you can't not go. It's almost like there's just too much good material, et cetera.
Yeah.
You got to go. But I think this is more, there is an attraction. Celebrities, people in power are attracted to other people in power. It's just how it works. We've seen media folks flip-flop, TV, celebrities, rappers, athletes. They hate the guy 1 minute and then they get the invite and the next thing you know, they're DJing a party at a Trump MAGA celebration. So there's something about being proximate to power that is too alluring for folks already in the spotlight to turn down. I think that's number one. Number two, I just think there's a curiosity, especially if Maher and Trump don't know each other well. There's a curiosity about, is this guy as, ridiculous as comedians make him out to be? Is he as bad as his opponents make him out to be? I kind of want to go see for myself. And I think those two things were really the driving forces behind this meeting.
Yeah, I like what you said, Ted, about when the president invites you to dinner and you're a comedian, you can't say no. You definitely can't say no if Kid Rock arranged it, would not want to upset him. I think that the role of a political comedian should be to help an audience in a way that's accessible because it's amusing and it's sharp and it's usually condensed into this digestible joke, see through whatever image a candidate or office holder is trying to project to the world. And Bill Maher got inside the room. So he was supposed to be able to even more easily see through this image, give us the behind the scenes, the man behind the curtain kind of thing. And instead, he put up the smokescreen. He projected the image that is more beneficial to Trump. He added to the illusion. And that's what was so disappointing about it to me.
I'm fascinated here because I vociferously disagree with you guys. Considering the state that comedy is in now, I think if top billing comic gets invited to dinner with Donald Trump, turning down that invitation is the easiest thing to do in the world. I think we have entered an era of comedy, for better or worse, where one of the requirements, at least among progressives, if your audience comprises mostly left-leaning people, one of the requirements is moral uprightness. Like, we are using humor to drive home principles, right? I totally hear what you're saying, Molly, about using comedy as a lens to clear away smoke. Comics certainly didn't used to do that, I guess. I mean, I think of Johnny Carson being the most innocuous, all of America, don't offend anybody figure in the country. I'm amenable to the argument that that's what comedy has become now, but yeah, I'm not sure.
Kind of what you're getting at, or the way that I am seeing it, is perhaps it's the idea of access comedy in the way that we have access journalism.
Yeah, sure.
And a lot of people object to access journalism because they say you invariably get taken in when you become that buddy-buddy with someone. And other people say, well, that's the way to get the inside information. Obviously, Bill Maher did this terribly. But if he had gone in there and he had then had a fresher insight into Trump, and as I believe we're going to talk about later, I hope we'll talk about later, part of the problem with comedy right now is nothing feels fresh. It's all the same joke over and over. Then I would say it was valuable. He should have taken that meeting, and I wouldn't say that it was a moral failing that he showed up at the dinner.
I'm just not sure that comedy is a form now to change minds. I mean, I'm barely certain that journalism is a form to change minds, but I'm even more skeptical about comedy just with how polarized and divided we are, which takes me into, very neatly, our next question here, which is regarding the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is coming up, and this year is going to have a very different feel. In a break from tradition, the board of the association in charge of planning the dinner decided against featuring a comedian. And the reason for that is to avoid the, quote, politics of division. And I don't think it's a surprise to any of us here that we're in a politically divided country. I have been to the Correspondents' Dinner exactly once, and it was the first year that the last Trump administration got rid of the comedian.
Yep.
But do you think comedians, especially political comedians, of course, are responsible to any degree for that division? Or are they just responding to it? Are you silent or were you silenced?
I don't think so. I don't think so. They may be responsible for exacerbating an existing division or responsible for calling more attention to divisions that already exist. But I don't think they're the rift creators. And, the Correspondents' Dinner, I think, look, Trump, when he went to the dinner when Obama was president and Obama kind of made him the butt of a few jokes, I think that scarred the man. If you are the president at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, the comedian is going to make fun of you. That's just how it goes. Trump is too thin-skinned for that. He can't stand being the butt of a joke in front of lots of folks. So I think the reason it went away wasn't because it was too provocative or the comedians weren't funny or they're being too divisive in a time when we need unity. It's that Trump can't take a joke. He can only make them. And so the dinner changes as a result.
Yeah, totally agree with that. The risk of political division is not why there's no comedian at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The year that Michelle Wolf gave her set.
Incredible set.
Really upset a lot of people. And not only did she upset the Trump administration by saying that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was telling lies from the press podium and by making fun maybe of her eye makeup a little, she also mocked the media. And she said something like, you guys love breaking news and you did it. You broke it. And the media did not like that either. I am not sure that we can take a joke. So that's not what's going on here, of course. But I want to push back a little maybe against the idea that comedians and left-leaning comedians don't bear any responsibility for political division. I think that they're responsible maybe in the same way that calling Trump voters deplorables is responsible. If comedy comes across just as condescension, then I think it can be part of the problem. And, I think some people have this issue with Jon Stewart, who sort of started the modern day tradition of political comedy. There was a New York Times op-ed at one point that called him the patron saint of liberal smugness. The dangerous part to me wasn't that conservatives got so mad at Jon Stewart that they went off and voted for Trump. It was more that liberals weren't encouraged at all towards self-reflection or self-mockery. They were assured that they were right about everyone and everything, that it was the Republicans who were the hypocrites or the ignoramuses, that there was little worth mocking and therefore fixing about them and the way they presented themselves.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you said about the comedy of the right. As we were preparing for this podcast, I sent Molly a tweet that was like kind of iconic years ago from the alt-right conspiracy theorist Paul Joseph Watson. It's something like, the right is getting better at comedy, and it's making lefties nervous.
Let me tell you, Drew, I'm nervous now.
And we laughed at it.
Who's
at the
even
time,
a right comedian?
Well,
I can't even name one.
Okay, right. Okay, so I think this is. I mean, Ted, I went digging, and I mean, it's crazy that it took digging, quote unquote, for me to find these comedians with millions and millions of listeners on their podcasts, but Theo Vaughn, it was a name that was not familiar to me, but he is massively popular. Andrew Schultz on the Flagrant podcast. I watched some of the Andrew Schultz stuff, and he had, I saw a YouTube short that had 5 million views or something. And he's telling some joke about how the Jews in the audience are safe because all of the lesbians who would otherwise hate them are at Columbia right now at the pro-Palestine protests.
Oh, geez.
And I'm like, okay, this isn't for me. But he's playing to a packed house that is just cackling at this. And even though it may not be for me, it's a double-edged sword to be oh, you shouldn't be making these jokes.
Trump went on both Flagrant and on Theo Vaughn's show leading up to the campaign and kind of his tour de podcast push to win over the manosphere. So,
And he did SNL, you remember, in his first run. So there's something happened between Trump administration 1 and 2 where there was an embrace of these things early on, probably to win voters and to get it, just to become more likable, that he just doesn't care about anymore. And it allowed him to be a little bit more polarizing, or allowed comedy to become more polarized as a result.
So I want to talk more about those ideas as well as about our personal relationships with comedy beyond what quite bad jokes we find amusing. That's right after the break. Welcome back. I'm Molly Roberts, and I'm here with comedian extraordinaire Drew Goins and Ted Johnson talking about the role of comedy and what it should be. But overall, do you guys think that comedy is rising to the moment in this period of general anxiety or falling flat?
I was watching clips from the first big ceremony at the Kennedy Center since Donald Trump's takeover and replacement of the entire board. And John Mulaney, the comic, welcomes everybody to the 26th and final Mark Twain Prize for American Humor. And that very much worried me as much as it tickled me, because it does feel like we're in a really tough place with comedy right now. So much of the political comedy is either trying to just trot back out the Trump 1 playbook in a way that's not suitable to the second administration, or it is so worried about being cringe and trotting that out again that it's just producing this watered down, subdued version of comedy. I also don't want to ignore the fact that comedians are people who have livelihoods that can be threatened, just like university administrators or lawyers at these big law firms that Trump is threatening. Nikki Glaser, who is usually a pretty fearless, very funny comedian, was quoted at the Twain Prize saying that she has been self-censoring a lot of jokes because she doesn't want to get detained. I can only fault comedians so much for not, quote unquote, rising to the occasion.
Yeah, I think two things. If it's rising to the moment, I think if you are looking for comedy as an escape, I think you'll find that. tons of specials on Netflix. Social media is full of tons of clips of folks' sets from around the country or from televised specials. So in that regard, it is doing a thing that people probably need more than they have in recent history, which is a break from the chaos of our politics, if only for a moment. You guys know I study race and democracy, all this stuff. Look, I have been in very harrowing military situations, and we were making jokes.
Yeah.
I've read the slave narratives, and they talk about being beaten in the day and then laughing at night and having to dispel their masters of the fact that they don't enjoy slavery just because they're laughing and dancing in the evening. They're still people. They still have to find some kind of joy in life, no matter how horrible it is. So to that point, perhaps it's filling its role. But if we look for comedy as critique on society, I do not think comedians have met this present moment, or at least not yet, because this is a moment where jokes can shed light on how ridiculous something may sound or how unconstitutional or unjust something is. But to the point you just made, Drew, if you're willing to put your face on a Trump joke, you have to be willing to take Doge or whatever else comes after that.
Right.
And it's a chilling prospect for folks who just aren't that interested in going up against the United States government in order to make a livelihood for themselves and their families.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because the right complains so much about cancel culture. You've presented the flip side of that, which is a real cancel culture, an actually dangerous response to being too critical that I hadn't thought too much about.
Yeah, it's I think if you ask somebody on the right, it is jokes that are anti-woke, right? It doesn't matter how unsophisticated the joke might be. And on the left, it's really hard because I think everything has been condensed to Orange Man Bad. And there's so much pressure, I think, to not sink to the level that even people on the left turned on Michelle Wolf because, she was, I consider that set subversive and so good. I watch it every year around the Correspondents' Dinner because I remember seeing it the day after and being like, oh my God, this is incredible. But yeah, it's the left has imposed, I think, a respectability politics on comedy that I don't think is a healthy situation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that there are a few challenges with Trump. One of them I mentioned before, things are really sad. It's hard to make people laugh about them or want to laugh about them. Another one is that some stuff is just too obvious what you want to make fun of to foster much creativity or originality. The macro critique of what's happening here is really obvious. We're descending into authoritarianism, and then there's not maybe as much of a need to sort of think hard about what are the micro critiques you're trying to make with your comedy. What is the manner in which this is happening? What are the cultural or social or political dynamics that are enabling it? And it's only when you look harder at those that the comedy is really going to be good.
Yeah,
Part of why John Oliver is, I think, better than some of the other people out there right now is because he's focusing on more specific topics. So he's forced into specific critiques too, right? I
mean, it was subversive when Charlie Chaplin produced The Great Dictator in the 1930s, right? But it's not it's not going to be subversive to reheat Charlie Chaplin's nachos. Sorry. Yeah, it feels like such a the Democrats are not nearly as bad as Trump, so therefore we should make fun of Trump in the vast majority of our stuff. But comedy is not journalism. If it's funny, it's funny. There's no equal time provision for a stand-up set.
Yeah, no, look, there's a fine line between critique and cruelty, but the good comedians can walk that line. And I just don't know if right-leaning comedians have figured out a way to do that as well as left-leaning comedians have. And that's not an indictment on either side, but a distinction between the types of comedy that the different sides of the aisle share. And Trump's persona, the character, the sort of whole MAGA movement kind of likes a little bit of meanness in their stuff. I mean, I may be trying to make too much of an art out of of comedy in our discussion here, but I think it's an important distinction to make when considering the role that comedy plays in societies writ large, to include the present moment.
So I'm curious, what is each of your personal relationship with comedy? How do you like your comedy besides, I'm so sorry in advance, besides, well done.
Oh, no.
My introduction to comedy was the same as Eddie Murphy's, which is listening to my parents' Richard Pryor albums in secret when they're not home or when they're sleeping. And so comedy to me was always vulgar, always explicit, always subversive, challenged the norms. There was sort of nothing off limits, and that's what gave it its brilliance, or at least the good comedians their brilliance.
You might have gotten this already from Da Economy is Good, but I like my comedy pretty stupid at this moment. The kind of stuff that appeals on the gut level rather than a more cerebral one. Like recently, I watched about 5 times over and over this video of a penguin walking extremely slowly down a slippery ramp, and then suddenly at the last moment, his little flippers start to sort of windmill cartoon style, and he just goes plop into the water, and the whole audience of the aquarium starts cackling at him in laughter, which is maybe the meanest comedy possible, actually. So, like, I'm sorry, little penguin friend, but...
Cruelty, not critique.
Right.
I find myself of late gravitating toward the stuff that is just totally absurdist and divorced from reality, because I think what you said, Ted, about escapism is really worth something. I will be on Twitter and I'll laugh at the political jokes that various accounts are making, but then I will log off and watch a 45-minute special from like Julio Torres about his favorite shapes coming by on a conveyor belt, and he says, "Oh, this one is a square who's just had a really bad day." And I'm like, okay, it's just so nice to be something that is so not of this world.
Well, on that note, I think everyone has had their fill of comedy, and we will wrap this up. I hope both of you have better days ahead than my penguin or Drew's sad square. It was really great talking to both of you.
Enjoyed it. Thanks for having me, guys.
This episode was produced by Hadley Robinson and Regina DeHeer, edited by Demir Marusic, Chris Sulentrop, and Allison Michaels, and mixed by Emma Munger. Special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne. Thanks for listening to Impromptu. Please send us your thoughts about comedy in this political moment and any terrible jokes. Email impromptu@washpost.com. And be sure to tune in on Tuesday to hear our colleague Dana Milbank tackle the biggest political news of the moment. If you're enjoying the show, follow us on your favorite podcast app.